So it's a long structure. In fact, there are two of these projects, but similar by the same architect. So he sees this is like it has the shape of a larger wall, and you would have housing. You have housing in there, but together it creates this strong image of being all part of a larger wall. And the same for the tower in Milan, the Torre Velasca, which also has such a very strong presence and image that he believes that could be a solution to reinforce the identity of the place and at the same time be flexible about the program. So this idea of making the city using strong forms that belong to the local history was used in design. This was more, I think, more an exercise. I suspect the students, because the name here of Peter Riemann was one of the students. So Ungers, together with Rem Koolhaas, who was the teaching assistant, they tried to imagine how Berlin, which was again very destructured at that time, it had been bombarded, many people left, so it was overly open with a lack of texture. So the approach here, the concept is to say, let's use this gross form, so this big form, in order to have a number of interesting places. So they use the metaphor of archipelago, a collection of islands, and instead of trying to invent something new, why not just using a good example, a fragment of a city that was already designed before, that worked well, and bring it here. So it's like a collection of very good designs that, in their view, are examples of design that can be put together in this idea of an archipelago. So you see here some of the projects. You have, for instance, the Aubu project by Le Corbusier, which, by the way, was not built, but then they would put it there. So that's like a really a collection of excellent design, independent objects, but then each one has the capacity to accommodate different functions. But did it get implemented? Not when we look at the work of Ungers himself, he didn't really apply this concept, but you have Ricardo Bofill, who was a Spanish architect. He made some crazy stuff also, and that somehow respond to this idea of the gross form. So in this case, this is like a housing project that is a sort of agglomeration, conglomeration of the local housing type, but then in the form of a mountain that would somehow be dialogue with the mountain you see at the back there. He also made this crazy project, Walden 7 in Barcelona. Have you been there? Have you visited? So it's like a vertical city, basically. It's social housing, but really massive, and it has such a strong presence. I'm not sure that it's nice to live in. As a student in architecture, we could visit the shared space, but it's still quite remarkable because of its size, because of its form, which was quite new at that time. And the idea here is really to create a little city on its own. And then at some point, it became a bit too much obsessed with image and references. So this is a social housing complex in France, I think in the periphery of Paris, which then literally makes a reference to the antique architecture, but you can imagine. So this is social housing. In some way, it makes you proud of living there, so it dignifies the function of a social housing. You don't live in a stupid apartment, you live really in a monument. But then I guess you cannot dry your clothes on the window, because it would ruin completely the whole effect. So there's a balance to be found there in providing a nice environment in which people can be proud of to live in, but also to have enough flexibility in the way you can appropriate the space and live in it in your own way. This is another project by a colleague or of Botli, also Spanish, Manuel Nunez, and that's in Belgium. For those who want to explore Belgium during the weekend in Wallonia, in a former coal mining site. Social housing also, but then you see the English form of an outfit. Here also you could imagine that if one of the occupants has an umbrella, parasol, and different colors, then the whole image would be ruined. So again, the idea to how far can we go in this collective image to accommodate different hosts. Now, I would like to make, this was all about types and morphology and how you would inscribe your work today in the continuity with the past. This is more about the way we perceive our environment. And for this, I would like to ask you, you all have a piece of paper available, not too far, or maybe you ask a friend. And I will ask two volunteers to come here and help me, because I'll ask all of you to make a mental map of Leuven. So you know, normally you know Leuven a bit. So I will just, it will take 2 minutes, and it would be nice if two of you could come and sketch it here. So, okay, good. Okay, you have to win. Maybe you two first. You can come here. I hope we have this. So you all know what a mental map is. So a mental map is what do you remember from a place. So you close your eyes and you what do you see from the map? It could be a plan. Maybe it could be something different. It could be a combination of a plan and some remarkable elements. Let's try to do this in 2 minutes. You have to first bring your papers. Okay. Maybe don't go too far, then you can explain it. Okay, let's have a look. So first thing is really nice to see how different the two drawings are. So also walk a bit, and maybe raise your hand to looking at your drawing. Which one looks more like yours? Does your drawing look more like this one, or more like this one? Okay, good. And what is the main thing you have in common here? Anything else? What is it like? The church and the station. Yeah, please. Yes.
It's actually based on the CGLM workshop, because when we started this course, we started with a mapping of open. So I mapped all of our projects that we chose. I also mapped my house.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, that's probably the place you know best in Leuven and from where you moved.
Yeah.
So you had this exercise the first week?
Yeah, so I think two projects were in the station. One was at the Kessel Park, no? And ours was in the center. Did I miss something? And the chairs, the other market, and the
All right, good. And then here, explain us. What do we see?
It's more a series of landmarks in the experience of moving from parallel routes in the morning from where I live very close to the center of Leuven. There's like different thresholds along the place, and then you get to the forest, and then the forest disappears and becomes a castle, and there's the train that happens there. So it's more landmarks.
Yes.
As I cycle. But
And from eye level, right?
Yes.
Because have you ever had the opportunity to fly over Leuven? Or it's just
no, I only said overboard.
yeah. So yeah, I think the two are very, very interesting because they really show. This is a more abstract view, of course. Now we are more used to that because we look at maps, we have Google Earth. But then in medieval time, most maps were in fact like this. And this was trying to be a plan that was mainly elevation.
yeah.
And then, yeah, this one, as you say, is more about the way you experience space and you remember it from your eye level in the street. And what the others were trying to organize it. So this is exactly, thank you very much. Kevin Lynch, you probably already know him and his work, but it might be good to look back at his work. So he was an urban planner and very much interested in environmental psychology. So environmental psychology is still a science on how do you understand space around you. And he used this technique we just made now of mental map or cognitive maps to explore how people see, navigate, and remember urban spaces. Because one of the main critiques he had with regard to the modernist project is that it was too abstract, too anonymous, impossible to remember. We saw some pictures with all the buildings exactly the same. He said we should learn from how people perceive, or how we all perceive and remember space, and use that in our design. So the term he's defining here is imagibility, or easier to pronounce, legibility. So the way a design conveys an image that makes a place memorable and easy to navigate. And in fact, if you look at maps from the medieval times, or children would also make such maps where it's a plan, but then the building you see it from you see the facade, and indeed it's much more easy to remember such things. So by doing several, this is a more contemporary example, but you see how San Francisco, it would be more or less a plan with the streets that are used. Interesting is that not everything is covered, because you mainly remember the places you use, from your home to your working place, or the bar you go to, the park. So it's already very selective. And then it's a combination of plan, the way you can move through the city, but also the elements that you remember visually. So he tried to make a taxonomy, so define a number of elements that most of the people he asked to make a mental map would use to describe mentally what they remember from an urban environment. You have the path, so the lines we saw, the edges, the barriers, the physical barriers that really separate one space from another. The district, which would be the larger section, which are clearly can be distinguished. The nodes and the landmarks. I think that's the term we use, the landmark. So an element that really stands out and that it can be a reference point in the way you orient yourself in an urban environment. So this is a more kind of, again, analytical framework that you can use to understand the space. That has become also very classic important, but you could use that in your design also. If you want to identify problematic areas, for instance, the edges could be something to address. You can make landmarks, you can, so it can be a step in an analytical phase to then move to design. Building on that, I'm not sure in fact if you, because it's almost at the same time, but this researcher and architect, Gordon Cullen, was very critical about the new towns. In the UK, you had all these new towns. He wrote a book in the 50s about it, saying it has a too low density, it's just lost objects in a big green field. You see it from the cover of the original edition of the book. So this is how new towns would look like from the 40s, 50s in the UK, and how he thinks a good city or a good urban environment should be. Much more complex, much denser,